Hi, this is Farah Hijazi, Survey Architect at ESC. You are looking at 6 slides which I have been developing in an effort to get some clarity about how the ESC schedule works. I'll just briefly touch on each of these slides, and then I'll show you my findings one by one. This slide here essentially is a graphic visualization of what all of these dates mean. However, I have anchored 4 dates which don't really change in a matter of speaking, in an effort to understand how the other cells get affected. And it's also color coded based on the various teams. But it is based on a sort of a equalized team approach where all team members are somewhat doing same workload. This second slide here actually provides some insights on how we work across the new year, from the previous year into the new year, and how things go between program years, from one program year to the next. I've decided to call this scheduling mechanism or scheduling type a single phase scheduling type, because I've come to discover that we can actually change our scheduling methodology to a triple phase type of a scheduling system. This slide here depicts, again, year after year of what the program year looks like in relation to the rest of the year. What's interesting is that we tend to, and as you'll see in the upcoming slides, we seem to divide the year vertically as far as workload in graphic or visual terms. And I'm proposing here what might happen if we didn't divide the workload vertically across the new year or the Christmas holidays, and divided it horizontally, and what design options or concepts we might come up with to restructure the schedule for a better way of output, for better performance of everyone, and for better output. This here begins to describe the early phases of the study of a triple phase schedule. And the reason it's triple phase is because it's creating these steps where each program year will have projects that are summer program year, fall program year, winter program year, and spring program year. And we just sort of developed this concept to see where it goes here. This begins to show a little more detail how we might analyze the schedule and update our current schedule to accommodate this way of thinking, and what we can anticipate the team collaborations might evolve to be based on the attributes of this triple phase scheduling. And this slide here essentially indicates a high level of promise for a successful outcome in team collaboration. Without further ado, I'm just going to start reviewing with you this first slide and some of its attributes. So what we're looking at here is essentially this schedule graphically represented. I am showing all of the centers here, which are approximately 40 of them, with various lines shown in this zone. I'll explain what this zone is shortly, but the colors represent the 5 different teams we have at ESC. The dates here are representing those that are anchored, and at least a couple of them, one over here and another down here, strictly don't change. Why? Because this is essentially the beginning of the program year, which we can say it's around July 1st. Now in this occasion, the survey date is July 8th. But more or less, we can say that this corner here is anchored on July 1st. This one here, down at the corner, is June 30th, which is the expected time of the last update of the report. In this column, there may be several updates happening closer towards June 30th. For the purposes of clarity and snapping them correctly to the exact line, I have made this July 1st, 2020. So this corner is anchored and this corner is anchored. then I'm looking at this date here, which is 11/10/19. But when I look at the date on this schedule, which is located over here as being 3/10/20, we see that the date changed. And why it changed is because before, when the screen was blank, completely blank, and we hadn't started the work, we had projected that there would be an approximate 4 month from the beginning of the survey to the upload of the final file. In contrast, for the last survey, which happened around April 1st, we projected that the upload will happen at the end of June. These are interesting because what happens here is, as you can see, the lines begin to go skew. It shows up here that we're given essentially, in an ideal condition, 4 months to the end of the upload to the FNC website from the start. I've added this other line because what I'm showing here are expected delays. But if we were in an ideal situation and all of these reports, one after the other, took only 4 months to produce, then we would follow this profile and end up over here. Now, why is this running out? It's because we're expected to finish the reports, which are down here in this zone, in 3 months. And this is kind of unrealistic when you think about it. We're starting a whole lot of work, and the work continues to pile up month after month, or week after week, survey after survey. And we have more and more work to do in a shorter and shorter amount of time. Now let me go over these dates again so that you can see. From April 1st to June 30th, that's 3 months. April, May, and June. All of April, all of May, and all of June. So why is it that we're getting 4 months early on and that starts to wedge and reduce? Well, it's because these reports invariably become late, but we have a hard cutoff date here at the end of June. And as you'll see in this slide here, what I'm showing is PY20. So this vertical line is our cutoff date. And we can't encroach into this zone here as I am showing. Therefore, what I've done, or what the schedule does, is it allows for these dates to get pushed back towards this red line. Now, if I go to this schedule here, I'm going to just zoom in here, and you'll see that when we go down this survey week here, we start, as I said, around July. But now that we're in January 28th, 2020, this is when this update was issued. Ironically, this survey has advanced when it was originally scheduled for April 6th. I can show you that here. April 6th. So it seems, because we have no more room to go that way, we push into this zone here. And that is why this wedge, or this sort of shape that I've created, this line is actually a parallel line to this other line. And I've placed it there to suggest that we really need to get all of these surveys done, started, and completed in no more than 8 months. July, August, September, October, November, December, January, February. Beginning of February should be when a survey already returns home from their center facility survey. That would afford them that same 4 months. So in the next slide, you'll see that I've taken corrective actions. Now, invariably, all of these reports are delayed, and so what we get are all of these begin to encroach into this zone here. So that's a little bit about how this graphic was composed. Now I'm going to go into the second slide. First of all, I want to say back here, now I've taken the corrective actions. Now I'm studying this methodology, and I'm trying to come up with a concept of what's going on and what we're doing. Now here I'm showing these white lines here across all of these reports, and I'm kind of compensating our methodology here. I'm saying, okay, some of these reports press on into this zone here. Some of these reports, they do get a little bit of an earlier start because some teams might begin to prepare a little bit ahead of time before they go out on their survey. They might have an opportunity to do some of their work beforehand, so they would be out here in this zone. Something remarkable happens when I study. And by the way, these little vertical white lines, those I'm suggesting that those are our lunch periods. This is our Christmas holiday. These all of these other white parts here that we see on this year that I have created here in this graphic. This is other living part of the year. The sleeping time, the family time, the bedtime story time with our kids, the outings, picnic outings or baseball games and so forth and so on. And this is the workload of the year, and we're composing the work here, and then the rest here are time off from work. And what's remarkable that set me off in a particular direction was, remarkably, it appears that we split this work across the Christmas holidays. It was as if it was a deliberate design decision or an attempt to solve this kind of a puzzle or this kind of a mystery of how this scheduling system came about. So I think that's pretty much it about this slide. Again, the takeaway from this slide is that we come up with a shape of what the ideal work situation begins to look like. Going on to the next slide, now I'm taking that shape and I'm going into 3 consecutive program years. And what I'm seeing is, although it looks like there's a whole bunch of white spaces between these, when you overlap them vertically, you see that there's absolutely no relief in sight from the workload, because all of these have already pressed into this zone here. And these guys, unfortunately, didn't get enough time to have the same quality of reporting as the ones that were up here. And immediately, we're faced with the new program year without any relief whatsoever to regroup and reorganize for the new program year. I thought this was a serious disadvantage of this type of single phase scheduling year after year. So here I'm saying it appears that the division across this 2 zones is vertical, and now I'm saying what happens if we go horizontally across this work zone and sort of explore, as a designer would, what might happen if not only you cross it horizontally, but you begin to then slide it and see how many ways you could possibly fit it into this box of 1 year. This box of 1 year is actually starting from June and ending in the next year's June. So, starting in July and ending in June, which is the program year. And of course, we have Christmas down the middle. So this is a shape that emerged, but as you can see, the corners are poking out into the other previous and future year. And then the question was, okay, well, what if it does something like this? What if we just start at this corner in the middle of this over here and end over here in this middle? And just like the other version, we take our Christmas breaks, the reports get a little interrupted, and the workload seems to be the same size as before in the ideal condition. Before going to the next slide, I want to raise one question now that we've done this study and realize that there are many other alternatives to breaking up the pieces of the work differently and fitting them inside the 1 year or 1 program year. In particular, this green one, or a light shade of green, is showing a lot of promise. And so the question is, here we're starting the program in July, beginning of July, and running it across Christmas. This is where the Christmas holidays happen, and then we go all the way to end of June. Now, the question comes up that, well, if that's the case, could we even advance this program year and make it coincide with the beginning of the new year? So in actuality, after the Christmas holidays, we're entering a new program year. So back in this zone here is where the previous year would be. And here I'm showing 2019. These would have to be changed to 2019. And what's interesting now is that the program year seems to fit inside what used to cross continuously across the Christmas in this previous version. Going to the next slide, this study now begins to suggest, well, what happens if we actually stagger the program year with 4 different seasons. For example, we'll have if we had 40 centers in this program year, as I'll show you in another slide here, you can see that we have program year 18, 19, 20, and in this program year 2018 we had 40. This year we have 42 in 2019, and 2020 seems to up that to 53. Ideally, again, all things being equal, I'm just saying, what if we could stagger these, and if we had, say, 40, then that would translate to 10 centers per team. If we had 11 centers per team, well then, we would be faced with 44 centers, or more or less. Now, one team might do more one year, another one might do one less another year. So this essentially says we have a summer program year of 2019, fall program year of 2019. However, when it comes to winter, as you can see here, this line depicts Christmas holidays, and now you're into the new year. So this actually becomes winter program year 2020, and of course this one here is spring program year of 2020. Now, how is it that we have 4 seasons here, but this schedule is becoming what I call a triple phase schedule? And that's because the 4th phase and the 1st phase are lining up across the beginning of the new year. Another attribute of this type of scheduling is that the program year falls inside its own year. As you can see here, I'm depicting year 2019, starting with January all the way to December, and then Christmas holidays, and then the new year. As you can see here, that program year 2019 now, with this type of thinking, with this type of staggering, both parts of the program year begin to fall inside their own year. Thereby, we sort of get ahead by 6 months by not having a delayed reaction of still being in the program year 2019 after the new year 2020. Here I'm showing 4 teams dedicated each to their centers, and I'm suggesting that there might be a home team made up of the leads. Now, the leads would be also involved in all of these centers and all of these teams. However, they may or may not go to the site for the actual survey. Now, something remarkable is going to happen when you set the schedule up like this. And I want to draw your attention first to the clear areas here just before the workload begins, for example, for this red team. If you notice, we have 2 teams here, the red team and the yellow team, and they seem to be getting quite a bit of lead time before their work zone, whereas the green team and the blue team are not getting as much of that preparation zone or free time to prepare for the workload that's up ahead. So here's the planner in me kicks in, and I do some critical thinking about what might happen. And it's very logical to think that members of the green team are going to approach 2 other teams to discuss or to sort of do a little bit of horse trading or negotiation, and see if you can guess what those 2 teams might be. Is it going to be the blue team and the yellow team, or the yellow team and the red team, or are they going to totally ignore red team and just focus on one team, ignore red and blue and just go with yellow? It makes perfect sense to think that they're in the same boat as the blue team here with shortage of time. So they're going to be talking to the red team and the yellow team. And they're going to say, if you guys are bored and have nothing to do, we're going to give you some of our centers so that you can get an earlier start on your work. But what we want is for you in exchange to give us some of your centers so that we can get that extra lead time. Now, this is a remarkable way of thinking to create a condition for teams so that they can actually begin conversation on collaboration, instead of creating conditions where they corner the leadership and complain about certain individuals and their participation in certain teams and wanting to get out of teams. So that's one attribute that I think is a hallmark of a successful arrangement here. Now, another attribute is, as you can see, we have red, green, yellow, and blue. So you would anticipate that this would be red, green, yellow, and blue. So what is happening here? What I've done here is I've actually taken the same blue that's down here and I've stuck them up here. So I've taken this sort of a quarter system and switched it around a little bit by putting the blue team ahead here, and then taking these three and sticking them down here. What's interesting now is to observe that the blue team that had the spring program year 2019 with a kind of a shortage of time in preparation for their workload here now has a much bigger time frame to prepare ahead of the workload that they have going into the program year here. Same thing holds true for all these other ones. All of the people that had more time, the teams that had more lead time, are getting less lead time, and the ones that had less lead time are now getting more lead time. And so the negotiations and the horse trading between teams and the collaboration will start to kick in to a whole new level, and you will be able to see a whole different type of a collaborative atmosphere among all of the staff members by the second year of applying this methodology and this triple phase scheduling system. I'm just going to go now to the slide here, number 5. I'm just showing the phasing now and an analysis of how we can look at the daily progress across the year and the daily progress across the program year. Now here again, it's worth mentioning the year is shown in a box, and that essentially represents, we have a representation of 3 years here. These jagged steps here that have a bottom bound here and an upper bound here, and then bottom down here and upper bound here, these are representing the program year. They total to 1 year, just like the box here totals 1 year, except they have slid across the seasons to sort of form the staggered steps. And again, the fourth phase and the first phase kind of line up. That's why I'm calling this, again, the first phase. So it's a triple phase scheduling. This line here represents the movement, the daily movement of time across the year. But when we try to analyze the daily movement across the program year, what we need to do is to look at these lines here, which are staggered. And these lines and their movement represents the daily activity across the program year. So it suffices to say the daily method of analyzing time is a little bit different than how we analyze day-to-day time in program year. Here I'm showing that the teams begin to take ownership of their work zone and projects. And now I think we enter a new phase where after the horse trading is done and after people do swaps of their centers and their time frames, we might even enter a phase where actually teams begin to review one another's work, because the collaboration has reached a level where this group of people here who are in the red team, who are given the red centers, are taking ownership of those centers. And although the green team might have gone to do the survey for those centers, the red team might still want to sort of influence the accuracy of the report or how the report is being produced, much like we see the leads influence the quality of all of the reports that are produced. So that's a little bit about that. And these red lines here begin to depict the zone where the majority of the work might begin to happen. As people become more comfortable with this schedule, they might begin to ask to go to their centers a little bit earlier. So some of these bars might shift a little bit to the left because they're already prepared and ready to go on their surveys. It's also noteworthy or important to mention that in this type of scheduling, you don't really lock someone onto a particular day to go to their center survey, to start their center survey. But what you might do as the leadership is to consider offering a kind of a window of time. For example, anywhere in January is the time you want to go to these 2 centers or these 3 centers. You pick which weeks you want to go, coordinate them with your center, and then make it happen. That seems to encourage a kind of a responsible behavior to begin dialogue with the centers and communicate and organize things ahead of time. Finally, now in this depiction, I'm essentially showing this repetition of the phases in each year, and each of these are about 4 months. So we have phase 1, which is 4 months, phase 2, which is 4 months, phase 3, which is 4 months. This is beginning to show a sort of acquiescence or assimilation among teams, high level of collaboration and cooperation. And then essentially we're coming back full circle to what the original graphic was looking like, which was this one here with all of these bars indicating the workload of the reports. This becomes a system where you begin to see a kind of a relief from program year, from one program year to the next, between the actual times where you have to go and do a site visit, so that you can concentrate on the production and the preparation of these reports. Finally, I'm showing how simple this might be in actual terms, because the implementation will be up to all of the facility survey teams. However, the only thing that might change on the report is we will have an addition here to each of the report covers. Here you see an example of a report cover, and here's how it might be modified for this particular report by adding that this is now a center that is on a winter cycle of program year 2018. So the next cycle for this program or this center will be the winter of 2021. Now I want to say a few things about how easy it might be to implement something like this across the entire Job Corps program. And I just want to draw your attention to a map I made, which has all of the centers, and these are divided based on program year PY 18, 19, and 20. This map, which is a Google map, was created so that I could highlight each of these so that you could see the entire Job Corps centers all on a Google map. Now this is fairly accurate, and if you don't believe me, you can go to the Job Corps website and essentially see the same map, except it doesn't have the colors which depicts various program years. So I'm just going to highlight what's coming, which is program year 2020. And it is critical that we begin considering a more efficient system for the upcoming year, particularly because of the number of centers that are in this program year, which I think, as I said, were 53. That's one thing that is kind of alarming, and we should be very mindful of. Another thing is the thing to keep in mind if we decide to consider this kind of an approach is to take all of the centers that are in current program years and try to create an even distribution in each of the 3 years. In other words, it's advisable to break them up so that they're very much close to being thirds, so that we don't have disparity in numbers from year to year, so that we can equalize the number of centers per year. Another thing to consider is when taking these centers and creating spring, summer, fall, and winter centers, to keep in mind that these don't necessarily relate to seasons coinciding with the location of the center. So, winter centers have to be a cold place, summer centers have to be a hot place. That's in fact not the way we want to think about this. Ideally, we want to synchronize the centers so that during the cold season, we're actually predominantly focusing on the southern centers, and during the hot seasons, we are predominantly focused on the northern centers, and so forth and so on. And another thing to consider is we just need to pay close attention that 3 of the seasons, I'm going to go back to this slide over here, where we want to consider the daily movement of time across the map of the annual year that we're showing in this box formation. As you can see here, why am I calling this work zone here summer program year, for example here 2018? It's because the predominant amount of workload is beginning to happen, which coincides with June, July, August, September. And this one here is called fall because the predominant workload is happening in September, October, and November. This one here is called winter because actually the predominant workload is kind of pushing towards spring. But here what we can do is we could still call it winter, and as you can see, this program year is actually where we get 1 year ahead. So now we're into winter program year 2019, and the predominant workload is starting January, February, March, April, which are winter months. And here again, now in spring, we can see this is spring of PY19, that the predominant workload is beginning to happen in April, May, and June. So this is a little bit about the psychology or the way of thinking of these seasons. It suffices to say that when we go to distribute the program years across these new systems of triple phasing and triple phase scheduling it, we have to be mindful that what used to fit into 1 year is now fitting into a couple of years. And so we would have to do some swapping of centers, and it might mean that one center gets a survey team revisiting it after 2 years for just 1 year, or several centers get revisited after 2 years, and several centers might get revisited after maybe a little bit longer than 3 years. Maybe it would be 3.5 years, or 3 years and 3 months. However we analyze it. But it's just noteworthy to mention that this adjustment will have to happen if this type of a triple phase scheduling is going to be considered. Anyway, that's all. I kind of wanted to share these concepts and ideas with you because I think that people who are well informed about possibilities happen to make better decisions about the future of a system and the impacts it has on all of us. I'm just one architect manning one team during 1 week and conforming to whatever system is created and working with it. And I thought that this was worth everyone's time to consider as something that might help us possibly do things a little bit more efficiently. And I believe this is something that I can personally back financially and put money towards to make into a reality. Thanks for listening, and best of luck.